Hello, my name is Mark Greenway with LIG Marine Managers, and this is MEL The Basics. I'm going to start out with, who is this for? This is for agents, carriers, and insureds who want to understand generally about MEL and the simple understanding of how to get it done. Now, this is a basics course. So if it's all familiar to you, congratulations. Hopefully you know somebody who you can share this with and they will find this rewarding. I'm going to start out with Charlie. And for most of the time, LIG is talking about insuring employees. We've got Charlie navigating between state workers' comp, Longshore, and then MEL or crew and P&I. Today we're just going to talk about the MEL, which is Charlie on a vessel. But I want to start out by saying this is part of a suite of policies that you need to consider for your insurance. So let's start with a little bit of history. In 1920, the Jones Act came around and said an employee can sue his employer if he is injured or if the employee is killed. Their heirs can sue the employer for injuries when on a vessel. 1920s, this was nice and easy to get covered because they had the P&I policy. P&I policy is the ship owner's liability policy. And they said, oh, here's just another liability. We're going to add this to the P&I, which is great. And from the 1920s on, that's been a perfectly great way to cover the Jones Act and other admiralty exposures for an employee on a vessel if you have P&I on that vessel. However, you don't always have P&I on the vessel because sometimes you're on someone else's boat, like whether it's a cruise ship or an oil rig or any number of other people's vessels. If you have your employee on somebody else's vessel, you can't buy a P&I policy on that vessel because it's not your vessel. So sometime, and this is the best guess I have, is that sometime around the 1970s, somebody came up with the MEL policy. It's the Maritime Employers Liability policy, and it's the solution to covering those employees when they're not on your vessel. Through the time, we've realized that we've expanded it and done other things. But generally speaking, the entire point of the MEL policy is to provide the employer coverage for when they have employees on a vessel for any of those liabilities. And on the nice part about this is that the name of the policy gives it away. Maritime Employers Liability gives you what it is straight away. I'm going to call it MEL because Maritime Employers Liability takes too long to say out every time, and I'll just forget. So, when do you need MEL? Whenever you have employees on a vessel. That's it. Nice, easy answer. Completely sorted. If you have employees on a vessel, get MEL. Nice and easy. So what do you get when you buy an MEL? Here are the benefits. You get coverage for TWM&C, General Maritime Law, and the Jones Act. Now, I'm going to go into the TWM&C and the Jones Act in a little more detail. But General Maritime Law is just everything else that an employer is liable to their employee for having them in an admiralty in the open water settings. Nice and easy. So TWM&C, transportation, wages, and I call that unearned wages, maintenance, and cure. So transportation, getting you to back home, getting you to the hospital, getting you all of the medical care, all the places that you need medical care. That's the transportation. Wages, just the unearned wages of when you're injured and you can't work, there's the unearned wages. Maintenance is the room, board, and other living expenses that you are not getting covered because you're injured and can't work. And cure is all the medical care that the employer is responsible for until the employee gets as much better as we can possibly make them. Now that we've been over TWM&C, what does the Jones Act? Who gets Jones Act benefits? If you're on a boat, now I'm saying it simplistically, but boat is any floating object that is capable of horizontal motion. So it could be a raft, a canoe, an oil rig, a cruise ship. All boats basically are vessels. So we're going to simplify it and say if you're on a boat, if you're working, if it's part of your job to be on there, you can get Jones Act benefits. You may not automatically because you may fail one of these other ones, but if you're on a boat for your employer at the need or implied need or express need or direction, then you're working on the vessel. If you're helping, so you don't need to be operating the vessel in order to be helping the vessel operate. Now, one of the easiest examples on this one is a cruise ship. The point of a cruise ship is not to get you from point A to point B. The point is to make you fat, happy, and extract as much money from you in that process. So anybody who's on that vessel that is helping you make you fat or happy and extracting money from you in that process is helping with the mission of the vessel. And duration. This is when they say 25 or 30%. The rule of thumb in the courts is 30%. But in the rule of thumb, they say this is a rule of thumb and should just be ignored, basically. It says this is just a guideline at best. So don't get hung up on the 30%. Don't assume that 29% you're in the clear and 31% you're solid. There are several other sub things, but if you're considerably or a significant attachment to the vessel or vessels, then then you have the proper duration for the Jones Act. Now, you have to be in navigable waters. So, really simply, assume that all waters in the U.S. and outside are navigable. The only time that a body of water is not navigable is if it's wholly contained within a state and you can't get to another state, ocean, or other country with it. Now, I've got this beaver on a canoe because the traditional example they've given was if you can float a canoe loaded down with beaver pelts from where the injury happens to another state or to another country or to an ocean, then it is navigable waters. And you can ignore what the Coast Guard says. You can ignore what the Army Corps of Engineers say. The feds don't believe that navigability is the same between the different departments. So that's something to be aware of. Now, generally speaking, I look at, when I'm talking about non-navigable waters, my examples are Lake Buena Vista in Disney World. If you've ever been to Disney World, you take a little sternwheeler across from the parking lot to go visit Mickey. That lake is Lake Buena Vista, and it is landlocked. Can't get out. It can't get to another state. You can only get from the parking lot to Mickey. That's all you can get to. So Lake Buena Vista is a state act water. Basically, almost every other body of water that you know is probably navigable. So that's something to be aware of. The only time a vessel is not in navigable waters is if it's permanently removed. So if you have it out in dry dock or have it removed from the water permanently or indefinitely, then it is not navigable waters. And not something you have to worry about. It's no longer a vessel. It just happens to look like a vessel. So here's the best part. When does somebody get Jones Act benefits? You don't have to know unless you're a carrier. The determination as to the likelihood of getting Jones Act benefits is a pricing concern almost exclusively. There is very little that changes between a policy that is Jones Act exposed and one that is not. And the only thing that is in most policies that determines between those two things is a warranty of under 25%. So if you've given the full story to your underwriters, the coverage is the same. So if you say they're not over 25% of the time on vessel in a given year, and underwriters rate on that fact, that's a policy that protects you against the Jones Act if they find to be eligible, regardless of whether or not they were 25% that day. If the application's asked 25% in a given year, then that's what it is. So that is just a pricing concern at that point. It's underwriters trying to figure it out. If you're a carrier, come back. I have plenty more to talk about Jones Act and MEL and all the other things. This is just a dipping your toe into MEL for that. So if you are not a carrier, don't worry about it. It's helpful to know. It's great to explain. You can share this with them, with whoever you need to. But generally, don't worry about it. So I can't do one of my talks without giving my rules for coverage. And we'll go quickly over them. If you have employees go on a vessel, buy MEL. If you have at least Citus, buy Longshore. If you go on oil rigs of any kind, get OXLA. Those just basically say, if you have the potential for the exposure, get the policy and worry about the pricing and everything else as part of that. Get the coverage first, or work to get the coverage right away. Figure out the pricing as part of that. Coverage, all of these policies, the Longshore, the OXLA, the MEL, all of them should have, as long as you've given the right information on the application, should provide the coverage so you don't have to worry about it. Now, number 4 is the underlying linchpin of all of these. Give your underwriter the full story. Let them craft the coverage for you. There's a lot of experts in this industry who do this all year long. Give them the full story. Give them all the details you can on the application. It helps a ton. Give them that full story and let the experts do what they do. I appreciate you taking the time today to listen to me. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the contact information on this slide. Thank you very much.